In part 1 I ended with the question, if the Genesis God created life on earth, the universe and everything, why did he? This question is based on the assumption that if God has millions of angels at his disposal, then why bother creating another form of life? In Genesis chapter 1, notice that God doesn't make humans on his own. This is a surprise to most people that God was not alone. Up until verse 26 it appears that God has done everything on his own just by saying the word, but then everything changes when humans come along. So let's just take a look at the original Hebrew, just to make sure this is right. I am not going to attempt to read this, but I can translate it with the help of the Hebrew Internet Bible. And yes, it really does say us and we. Here is a literal English translation of the Hebrew. And he is saying, Elohim, we shall make human in image of us, as likeness of us. So who were these people or beings that helped God to make humans? Or did the Genesis writer make a mistake in grammar and God was on his own after all? Well, we'll never really know. But after reading and studying the Bible all my life, you will just have to believe me when I say that the detail always matters, whether it's Hebrew, Greek or English. And the detail here is definitely plural. But who or what these people, creatures, angels or gods were is not really important. What is important is why God did any creating in the first place. Think about it. If God was not alone when he decided to make the universe, the earth and everything in it, if he already had or has a supernatural or alien civilization in existence in another dimension of space and time, why did he bother making another life form? More to the point, why did he make anything at all extra to what already existed when he must have known it was all going to go pear-shaped? And why does the world around us confirm all this speculation? Why on one hand is the natural world so breathtakingly beautiful, and yet on the other hand basically flawed, with death, cruelty, natural disasters and extinction around every corner? And why does the natural world reflect the same problem that humans have? That we have the potential to be beautiful, honourable, noble and true, and yet we also are basically flawed, with death, disease, famine, war, destruction, violence, cruelty, immorality and injustice. Is all this just coincidence? Or are the parallels trying to tell us something? Are we really within a gnat's whisker of the tree of life? Or is it all just a delusion? So if the Genesis account is to be believed, if only as a parable of what actually happened, and if humans turned out to be different to what God expected, the creator scientist had a big decision to make. As I see it, he had three choices: destroy the lot and start again elsewhere in the universe, or walk away and let everything destroy itself in the course of millions of years. The never-ending cycle of life, death, war and exploding stars should eventually sort it all out. And thirdly, come up with a temporary solution, patch things up here and there, and come back later to see how things got along. Or didn't get along. Well, if you know anything about the Bible story, you will already know what is supposed to have happened. We are living in a world which is temporarily patched up, where death, disease, famine, war, destruction, violence, cruelty, immorality, child mortality and injustice are in a constant battle with what could have been a really good creation. And you will have to agree that this is pretty close to how things are in the real world, both natural and human. But let's return to the human scientist for a moment. What would he or she do to patch things up if the experiment went so bad that everything went up in smoke and flames? Would he sell his house, ruin his marriage and family, throw himself from the multi-storey car park, return next day and help the fire department pick up all the bits and pieces? Probably all these and more. Well, that's really strange, because if you think about it, that appears to be exactly what God has done, which means that not only did God patch things up, he went quite a few steps further to make things right, and all this seems to prove my point. The experiment in human life didn't go to plan, and something had to be done to put things right. Just examine what I said there and compare it with what is supposed to have happened according to the Christian view of things. Firstly, the scientist sells up and moves on. I will show in a moment how God did just that. He gave away the earth and disappeared. Jesus also gave away his life so that we might be saved, and he also disappeared. Well, at least physically, if not spiritually. The second one ruined his marriage and family. If you think of the deity as consisting of three persons, Father, Son and Holy Spirit, and the angels as his family, then at least two of those persons or beings were ruined as a result of life on earth. The third one, throw himself from the multi-storey car park. Well, the crucifixion was not exactly suicide, but what Jesus said and did at the time was suicidal and brought about his death in his early 30s. And the last one, return next day and help the fire department pick up all the bits and pieces. Well, virtually every prophecy in the Bible points to a new world in the future when Christ will return, and before that happens there'll sure be lots of fire and smoke and floods, and more bits and pieces to pick up than you or I can imagine. Now here are the Bible verses to support what I'm saying. This is the parable of the vineyard and the tenants, which Jesus told, and as with all his parables, it is metaphorical. It illustrates how God gave away the earth, even though none of us deserve to live here. Humans are described as tenants and farmers, and the vineyard, that is the earth, is on loan for a short period of time. Notice also that the landlord has moved away. Also think about what this implies in our relationship with the earth and the natural world, and how we should live here. Because we're tenants, we don't own anything, and we should take every possible step to look after the earth. It also means that the landlord could serve as a notice of eviction at any time he chooses. You really need to read the whole of this parable in Mark 12 or Matthew 21. It's one of the most important parables in the entire Bible. Here's the second one. According to the Hebrew Bible, which is now known as the Old Testament, God tried his level best with the Jewish people, then known as Israelites, but it was all to no good. He eventually gave up because they rejected him and just wanted to go their own way like everyone else. Was this another mistake on God's part, to think that a particular nation or creed would follow him and everything he said? Or was it God trying his level best to make the best of an already bad situation and causing himself endless pain in the process? You will have to make up your own mind about that, but I would go for the second option. The third one you already know about. He gave away his son to die on a cross, and if you're one of those people who believe that Jesus and God are one and the same, then he didn't just give away his son as a human sacrifice, but he went through all that torture himself. And this is the one that most people miss. Not only did God give away his son, but he apparently gave away all or most of his power to his son as well. Try reading the last book of the Bible called Revelation, which prophesies in detail about the end of the world and the beginning of the new age. You will find very little mention of God. We have thousands of angels, bundles of Holy Spirit, lots of Jesus, and billions of saints doing all the work, but not much about God himself. So yes, it really does appear that the experiment in life has gone wrong from the very beginning, and you and I and the entire human civilization over the past 100,000 years have been living in the consequences of that. If God is the creator behind it all, the signs are that he has certainly gone out of his way to patch things up temporarily. So was it all an accident? Well, to answer that question, you will have to ask yourself another one. If it wasn't an accident, Why did God do all that he did to make things right from his point of view? After all, he could have walked away from the very beginning and started again on another planet or in another dimension of space and time. But he didn't.